Okay, welcome to the CCSK Webinar. This edition is totally updated, of course, or at least most of it. So let's get started. We have a nice group of people on the call, and now I need to figure out where my forward clicker is, which is always, I'm working with two screens and it's always a bit of a challenge. Okay, what we will cover today is a little bit of what's IT look in the 21st century. Part of that is cloud, but there is a more fundamental trend to it, and cloud is just one manifestation of that. And I want to leave you this webinar with an impression of what the future is going to look like and the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead of us. From that, we can discuss why cloud and why cloud security in particular. And then we'll zoom in on CCSK as a specific individual cloud certification. I'll give you some hints and pointers to how to better understand the CCSK beyond what we can do in this webinar. For that, there's a free online training that you can attend to. That you can do that in slices and dices. I'll get to that. Then, how to convince your boss that you need to work on your individual certification. And then finally, I'll dive into some of the learning options that we can have, that you can have for attaining that knowledge and the certification. First of all, a little bit about me. I'm one of the world's most experienced independent cloud trainers. I've been training cloud stuff for about 3 or 4 years now. I've delivered this to dozens of audiences around the world. I think 13 countries at latest count, 4 continents, and the 5th one coming up. I am a certified trainer for CCSK. I also wrote a training called Cloud Adoption Essentials, which is a little less security related and a little bit more focused on cloud adoption. I hope to run that in Dubai 3 weeks from now during the GITEX conference and at other places. I'm also the co-author of the Professional Cloud Technology Associate training that is run by the Cloud Credential Council. That is bound to replace the CompTIA Cloud Essentials training that I wrote 3-4 years ago, and this started my career as a cloud trainer. And then there's a few more things. My history is, of course, I'm a pretty mature professional. I started my professional career at the University of Twente doing computer networks when nobody was doing that yet. I worked with, I then moved to industry system integrators to work on wide area networks and client server applications. So I've been around in that field. Then after the systems integrator approach, I had a brief stint at a internet provider, and that was, well, the longer story I'll say for another time, but that's where I did the experience that immediately led me to believe cloud is the future. And then spent about 7-8 years at Deloitte Consulting doing business cases for IT consolidation. And then independent, and then came this cloud thing. Let's not waste too much time on that. Oh, by the way, I'm also a board member of the Dutch CSA chapter. Okay, we already had some perspective in the chat before we started, so I'd rather skip this, but feel free to use the chat box to put in some of your information. I'm still interested in figuring out where Ganesh is from. The name sounds fairly Indian, but I have people from India from all over the world in my training. So, as a matter of fact, this week I'm running a virtual training and there's an Indian guy who's living in San Francisco. Next up then is we're starting to get into the meat of our story. Well, before that, maybe you want to spend some time typing out 1 or 2 things into where do you guys stand in cloud adoption, and what do you know already, and how relevant is that to you? Now, one example I heard is okay, we're actually delivering a web application that we could consider a cloud application. So that's one. So it means that you're actually, you have a vested interest in that. Okay, somebody says we have new application hosted on Amazon Web Services. Great, that's also an example, a great example. And is that like a strategic direction, or is that something like we're okay, good. Anyway, feel free to drop in some comments as we go, and maybe even reflect on what I'm doing or what I'm saying. Sorry, I can read your remarks, and it's also nice to see that you guys are engaged in what I'm saying. And maybe you want to say, well, slow down or speed up, or what have you. Okay, great. So this is all maturing. Yeah, this is interesting. I've been doing this now for 3-4 years, and the maturity of people that attend to my classes is definitely increasing. 3-4 years ago was like a thing of the future. Now people are actually doing this. Great. So here's one of my statements, one of my biggest statements. IT is outgrowing the capability of organizations to manage it. To manage IT, that's ambiguity. I've been around for a while, and I've seen IT grow fast for 60 years and counting. Now, I'm not saying I'm 60 years old, but I have some, I can see history. My first program was on punched cards in 1973, and it has been a bit of a ride. Back then, we had like 10 guys attending to one computer. A couple years back, it was one guy attending 20 servers, and we're moving up to the 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 100,000. And it is across any KPI that you can think of. We need that productivity. At the same time, the complexity is getting bigger. So you need more brains to actually run the infrastructure. And that just outgrows the size of an average company. And it will outgrow the size of larger companies. And then, of course, there's security. I mean, do you really think that, if you have 1.5 staff on security, that you can scratch the surface on that? It is getting more and more hard. Okay, thank you, Ganesh. Where are you from, Ganesh? Meantime, we can take a bigger picture over that 60 years and say, what happened? What happened in that time? We started out with a mainframe. Hold on, I need to mute my phone for a bit. I suggest you do the same thing. We started with the mainframe, or at least there was, of course, something before the mainframe, but that wasn't really digital computing. Then client-server came along in the 90s. That was when I moved into the precursor of the company of EDS. And I ended there when the internet started. I went to work for an internet provider. And now we have the cloud, big data, social media, etc., etc. Now, the important thing to notice is that it's not just a change in technology. It's also a change in adoption. And the adoption in the groups of people that adopt it. Mainframe was like back-end processing. Client-server moved into front-end processing. The internet moved the IT down to the consumers. And now cloud is pushing IT definitely into the B2B space. And it's pushing back in a way because cloud enables every company to be digitally infused. And each of these steps was a pretty disruptive innovation in the company. In the companies that worked with it. And if I have more time, I can really drill down into that. And that makes it hard for companies to adapt to that. And that's why it's important to understand those drivers and to make sure that you have people who guide the way, so to say. So it is not just about the iCloud or Dropbox or Salesforce.com or Amazon Web Services to run your servers on. It is about a fundamentally different new delivery model for IT. And that's one thing, that's buy side, so to say, but it also enables new ways to organize business. And that is, it's as fundamental as it gets. It is really fundamental. This is the industrial revolution translated into the information age, finally. Now let's see how complicated this cloud thing is. Now here's a sort of schematic view on the inside of infrastructure as a service. And this is a picture taken from OpenStack documentation. And let's see if I can put in my spotlight. Where you can say, okay, there's a ton of machines here, a ton of nodes. Now here are compute nodes. And in reality, in the private cloud context, you have like 1,000 of these or more. In the public cloud context, the largest cloud providers have like 1 million of these, or including the storage nodes, of course. And there's so much software around that to keep that running. and it has to be replicated, duplicated, has to be resilient across multiple sites. It is really, really complicated. And at the same time, if the cloud provider does their job correctly, they're going to make life really simple for you. Now, this is infrastructure as a service. In the end, and nobody really cares about infrastructure. Well, maybe IT people do, but the people that pay money for IT don't. So they care about applications. And they care about applications that by definition of cloud should be scalable and resilient. And how does that look like from an architecture perspective? Now, if you're not that much into IT architecture, you'll find this a bit of a complicated picture, but bear with me. It's not gonna last for long, all these complicated pictures. Now, back in the 90s and the end of the 90s, when people started building scalable web servers, they had to replicate the web servers. And then they figured out they needed load balancers. And then, one load balancer is no load balancer because it's still a single point of failure. So you need more of these. And if you're smart, you make these web servers or application servers stateless, which means that they don't have any state. Which means that they process a web request, hand it off, and then you're done. Which means that if you kill one of these, nobody gets hurt. So where do you leave the state? Well, you leave them in cache servers, like what is the content of my shopping basket, or you do it in the database where you say, well, has this guy paid, or is the stuff being delivered? And this is a lot of machinery to do well, to attend to. Think of scaling this to the hundreds, thousands, or maybe more machines. But once you have that, you have a really, really simple platform to run basically any code on. And we haven't seen the end of this yet. For example, we are pretty smart right now in running large-scale applications that take hundreds of servers. And let's say, but what we're also seeing with new stuff that's just around the corner, just announced this year, like Amazon Lambda, where you can have microservices run on this. Microservices that are like a tenth of a CPU or a 100th of a CPU. Anyway, there's a lot of complexity out there, and you need to run. The world is getting more complex. That's the whole point. Now, this complexity, Tim, I'll get to your answer to your question later on. Okay. What's the usefulness of what's this enabling? Well, I'm just going through this pretty fast, but to give you an idea of the scale of things. Here's an example of a company, a non-profit company I worked with. I was a member of them. They were a professional association. So they put all their members in a Salesforce system. Now, Salesforce is a SaaS application, but it also has a PaaS layer a PaaS platform under the hood, where you can, plug in your own stuff or somebody else's stuff. One example of that being a mailing list. Mailing list functionality is not something that Salesforce does very well. So that is an application that sort of interfaces with the Salesforce PaaS platform. And then another application would be to do the events that the members would go to. And they would record any attendance back into the Salesforce platform. So what you're seeing here is a suite of applications all living in the cloud, integrated by these SaaS providers, and delivering a nice application portfolio for you. And this is an ecosystem. You can have hundreds of these applications talking to one another. And you can actually have very small applications that plug into this landscape. So your entire architecture, so to say, is externalized. Now that has its challenges, and we'll get to some of these in a moment. This is like the supply chain that this in reality is, because there's not just the consumers not just have Salesforce, they have a ton of other applications, and that there's PaaS platforms behind that, and that's mapped to a different infrastructure provider, under the hood there. And the big question then is, who is in control? Who does what? How do you know stuff is being done properly and correctly? After all, we're typically talking about customer data, or other data for that matter, but there's something that you should worry about. So the summary is, the cloud is complicated on the inside, and it's the job of a cloud provider to make the cloud look simple on the outside. Now that's hard enough as it is. At the same time, as a consumer, your job is to make sure that everybody is doing their job. Anyway, cloud adoption is unavoidable. It is the future of IT, and it's happening now. Maybe I'm banging the drum too much here, but bear with me. In reality, we see that, but I'm probably preaching to the choir now. The majority of businesses are already using some form of cloud computing, and it is growing rapidly. They're maybe reluctant. Some of them are just basically, when I talk to companies, there's two things that they could do. Two situations are possible. One is that the board of directors says you got to go to the cloud as fast as possible, faster than is reasonable. And the other approach is, well, don't go into the cloud, it's too scary. Both happens. I'm not sure that's the right level of cloud adoption, because not everything merits cloud at this point. Only mature things should be put in the cloud. And of course, security, governance, compliance, risk management, and everything that comes with it is listed as the number one obstacle to cloud adoption. And that's the focus of today's presentation. As I said, the cloud enables new things. I gave you the example of the ecosystem, but it also allows, and this is really, really relevant, it allows DevOps, and it allows for very quick. Now, what's DevOps? DevOps basically means that there's no operations guy involved in setting up test servers and production servers, etc., etc. The job of operation guys shifts to making sure that that pipeline is there, and that the dev people can just throw in code and it gets tested, and when it's good, it gets deployed automatically. You need all the cloud characteristics to pull that off. But the business benefits are tremendous. Instead of one release every 6 months, you can have one release every 6 minutes. And of course, that will be micro releases. There won't be big releases, will be micro releases. But having a 100 releases a week of small increments really beats having one big release every 6 months or every year. So cloud enables that kind of feature velocity. Then there's big data. There's value in big data, but you need a lot of data to get value out of that. And for that, you need flexible resources, because one of the characteristics of big data is that you're talking about petabytes of data potentially that you need for a while and then dump. I was attending a presentation by Netflix CTO, then CTO, Adrian Cowcroft, and what they were doing were crunching log files, like a few terabytes of log files, and you threw it out to the cloud, took an hour or so or two, and cost you $30. If you build what a data warehouse costs that processes terabyte data sets? They're not cheap. Anyway, Tim, we're getting into CCSK in a moment. I'm just giving you the backdrop as to why I think CCSK is relevant. So cloud is the new platform for application development. And if you're in application development, you need to understand how to do that securely. And that's what CCSK is all about. Okay, this is what enterprises are doing. I'm going to skip that because you guys are already straight into it. Even banks are using the cloud and they're requesting security features. So if you're supplying to the bank, then you definitely should worry about demonstrating your security. Anyway, everyone and his brother is asking for security features, and for good reason. So, where are you? I think we covered this earlier on, and if you have some reflection on where what your current position is in cloud adoption, just drop it in the box. I've seen some stuff already, which is great. Okay, enterprise lessons. What are they doing? I'm gonna zip through this a bit. It's just that cloud is happening, and it's not just one cloud provider they're using. We also see that the top providers are better than internal IT, but the tier 2 and tier 3 providers could be, we'll see. Yeah, you may have doubts. So here's the point in terms of security. Let's move. We're focusing on security. Cloud computing is a form of outsourcing, generally speaking, with specific characteristics. And those characteristics lead to benefits. And by the same token, they lead to new risks. And that's what we need to understand so that we can, we need better brakes so we can drive faster. And there's no sense in having a fast car if you don't have good brakes. So what are the typical examples of new risks? Well, contrary to traditional outsourcing, it's not totally the outsourcing party or us. Both parties have a responsibility. Resources are much more flexible, which has benefits, but it also has risks because you share them with others, and they may not be there when you want. Okay, there's also ubiquitous access of cloud services, and that also means ubiquitous access by bad guys. So there's new benefits, new risks. So what are the risks in cloud? And a couple of years ago, the ENISA document, and this is part of the CCSK certification, by the way. ENISA stands for European Network and Information Security Agency. And they have produced a very nice document, which is, as I said, part of CCSK, and the top 8 risks that they mention are these. I'm actually repeating these risks in the online course that I'll give you free access to, with a little bit more detail. And it is about, a lot of this is managerial, and some of it is technical, like isolation failure, or the management interface compromise. Well, that's between technical and managerial. And it goes to show that there are really, in this world, new ways that you need to think about security. Let's see. And I'll get back to some of your questions in a moment. I love it that you're putting in these questions, so keep doing that. An example of what happens if you don't pay attention to this is a company called CodeSpaces, which closed its doors last year because it was allegedly a denial of service attack, but really what happened was somebody accessed the management plane there, the web console, and deleted basically all their data, and they went out of business, period. And this is just one a properly identified risk 3 years before. And the CCSK training, you'll learn how to avoid this problem. Now, it's not just that the cloud brings risk in itself, but it also brings uncertainty in who's addressing risks. Because if you have the wrong people, if you think that somebody else is doing it, and then you will have a window of opportunity, so to say, for a hacker. And loss of business is just one example. Okay. Let's get into a bit more. So where's this CCSK thing come from? Well, for that I need to elaborate a little bit on the Cloud Security Alliance. And that is a global not-for-profit organization. And if you look at the right-hand side, you see all the companies that are involved in that. And this is probably out of date already. And I think I made this snapshot a couple of months ago. It has a ton of research and educational programs. It's a place where professionals meet and work on new bodies of knowledge, really. And the two main things that they're doing is one is the professional certification, CCSK. I'm recording the session. I actually have a recording of an earlier session as well, but this is going to be better. And there's a cloud provider certification, the STAR program, which I'll dive into in a moment as well, because that will be a great tool for you to get started with even next week if you want to. The next CSA conference is I think 1 or 2 weeks in Las Vegas, and then in November there's one in Berlin. I will be at the Berlin one. Now, the Certificate of Cloud Security Knowledge. It aims to facilitate a common understanding of cloud security concepts, and that's, I think, the most important asset that CCSK brings. I think that it's important to understand specific risks, etc., and do the detailed technical drill down in a specific offering. But what's more important in cloud is that you have a common language to talk about you have a common language to talk about cloud security concepts. And I've also done a couple of in-company training sessions, and it's amazing to see how much quicker discussions move forward when people speak the same language. Even yesterday, a lot of people think they know about cloud, and I don't try to insult anybody, but I've had people say, yeah, I know about this, and then we'll dive into this, and they go like, oh, it's a little bit more complicated than I thought it was. And to really get it running, to move along with your team, make the right decisions, don't get slowed down by, I don't understand this is a risk, we're not going to do this, or people that are overly ambitious and just jump in without knowing what they're doing. It's you want to move along. And that's why you need this common understanding, and that in a team, that's definitely the value. Okay, I'll comment on your questions in a moment. This is going to be fun. That's why I'm zipping through the slides. If I move too fast, just slow me down. So what is CCSK? It has 15 domains, and it covers governance as well as operational sides. And technical sides to some also, encryption is part of it, but also enterprise risk management. The exam has questions for each domain, and it doesn't have questions that cross domains. So that's in a sense fairly easy. Even having said that, it turns out that still a number of people flunked the exam. I say the 15 domains are, let's say, a historical relic, and they overlap and cross-reference at various points. So that's a bit hard. That's why in the training, we don't really train that much to individual domains. It's combined. Although in the next training I'm planning to develop, it's going to be, again, a little bit different. At the same time, we know that early next year there will be a rewritten version of the guidance that's probably going to be a little bit more digestible. Anyway, so the CCSK exam is actually fairly simple from a technical perspective, although the questions are not always that simple. It's a timed exam, but it's open book. So you go to your own desk. You want to do this in the morning when you're at your brightest. No, don't do this at the end of a long work day. It's 90 minutes. You get 60 questions, and the pass grade at 80% is above average, I would say. There are multiple choice questions, so that part is fairly easy. Questions are never longer than a paragraph. There are no long scenario questions like CISSP has. There's no mock exam, but now let's say my joke is always when people say, "Is there a mock exam?" and I say, "Well, the short answer is no, and the long answer is yes, because you get 2 tries. So you can study, and then you go for the exam. You do what you can, and if you fail, well, consider that a mock exam, and then you can start studying again with your understanding of how deep the questions are. Typically, people that go to my courses pass it the first time, although every now and then somebody jumps in too early, or they do it at the wrong time of day. Anyway, the open book exam, the open book aspect makes some questions easy, but still you have 60 questions, which is 90 seconds per question. You need to know where to look, because if you don't know where to look, you're not going to make it in 90 minutes. So what are the domains? Well, I don't have the time to go through all the domains. I have in the online course that you will get access to, or maybe already have access to. By the way, if anybody has already gone through the Udemy training, just drop me a note in the chat box and tell us how you liked it. So here's some idea. It gives you, if you scan through this, you'll see how this really touches upon a number of themes that are relevant in cloud computing: infrastructure, data security, application security, user security, such as identity management, and even security as a service. And then officially the ENISA document is also part of the CCSK body of knowledge. The other 14 domains are from the Cloud Security Alliance document, but the ENISA document and the Cloud Security Alliance guidance overlap significantly. Although it makes sense to read them both because they have a different perspective. Okay, here's the the extended training that you can get on what's part of CCSK. Okay, it's not a CCSK training, that's why it's free, and you can go through this at leisure. It's actually pretty neat. I'm getting good reviews on that, as you can see. Back when I shot this picture, it was 8 ratings at 4.5. We have now 20 ratings, I think. More than 500 people went through this, or at least enrolled. I'm not saying that they went through it. You just go to Udemy Understand CCSK, and there's a couple of pirate copies out there. They only contain malware, not the real thing. So why should you do that? This is free. Here's the coupon, Eventbrite 25 September 2015. Now that's a European way of noting dates. Americans may have shake their heads around that. Anyway, you get lifetime free access to this course, and then there's a bit of fun in there as well. So, but you have to register before the 30th, so before Wednesday. But it's it takes you 3 minutes to register, and you can revisit that. So, in the summary, why cloud security and why not? And then I'll talk about some of the applications of CCSK, how it's going to benefit you and your work. So the new cloud world is like, it's not your daddy's data center anymore. On the left-hand side, the world is totally connected. And that means that the traditional infrastructure-centric security view, like, okay, let's protect the data center, put in a firewall and a couple of walls, and we're done. It doesn't work that way. It's a thing of the past. It worked when we had punch cards. I know, I had those punch cards. It doesn't work in a connected world. So what's the alternative to CCSK? This is a question we get all the time. So, of course, CISSP, CISM, CRISC, and there's a ton of others, are all relevant IT security certifications with different focus. And I know I get these people in my classes all the time. They have done, some of them have done like their list of courses is longer than a line in LinkedIn. And they all say, well, CCSK really adds value to that. And even though the others are getting a little bit cloud in there, CCSK adds value to that. That's what they say. So they just don't take my word for that. CCSK is the only training that's really focused on cloud security. Of course, at this time, in the near future, we'll have CCSP, that IC2 produced that. Actually, I wrote a chapter on CCSP. And the point is that it's both wider and deeper, so to say. And I did the exam 2 months ago. I passed the exam. I was probably one of the first guys. And I plan to do training for CCSP as well. And I'm actually running a CCSK webinar, 2 weeks from now, which you can easily find. And you probably get the notification through my email list. This will have much stronger experience requirements, so you have to renew that on a yearly basis. And it looks very promising, but it's going to be a while before you can actually get that, and it's a lot more work than CCSK. One of the things I plan to do is make some kind of upgrade course. So if you already have CCSK, then it will be like a couple more days of study, probably a little bit more, something like that. So that's the way things stand. Now, are there any jobs in CCSK? Well, go figure. This is, I just looked at monster.com this morning, and they're there. The jobs are there. Of course, CISSP has much more jobs, but they're there. And it is considered one of the top 10 cloud security certifications at this time. So I'm not saying that CCSK is going to bring you a job, but it's definitely you can make a point in any interview. Like, okay, I did CCSK. What, you don't know what CCSK is? Well, that's cloud security for you, right? Now, so much for a moment. We'll stick to the individual certification. That's CCSK. But CCSK tests a body of knowledge on cloud security. And that body of knowledge is also recorded in what's called the CCM, the Cloud Controls Metrics. And that is a set of controls that you can use to evaluate a cloud provider. Now, once the cloud provider is evaluated, that result can be put in what's called the Security, Trust and Assurance Registry. Now, what's the relation with 27001, Information Security Management System Standard? Well, the STAR certification is actually, that ISMS plus the cloud-specific controls. Because the problem with 27001 is that it's not really very cloud-specific. Actually, it doesn't prescribe any controls at all. It only suggests some of them. So certification is really the combination of those. And attestation is SOC 2 plus CCM. Now SOC, I don't want to get into that, but it's a sort of on the same level as ISO 27001, but a little bit more complicated. And the CSA is promoting this certification framework where there's not just one level of like you're good or you're not. There's multiple levels, and at the bottom level it's like a self-assessment. Can you fill in a questionnaire that demonstrates the controls that you have? Can you report on your controls? Because if you can't do that, then you're definitely on level 0 or -1 for that matter. And then the second level is where an external auditor actually thinks something of you, has an opinion on you. And in reality, that's even more fine-grained because it also reports on the maturity level. So it's like if this would be judo, it would be black belt, but second, third, or fourth dan or something like that. Anyway, there's a lot more to this story, and if I remember correctly, that's also on the Udemy training. Now I'm going to skip this for a bit because I'm going to show you the CAIQ document. So the CCM is strand, and this is a tool that you can use tomorrow. Well, tomorrow's a day off for most people. Tool that you can use on Monday. So the CAIQ stands for the Common Assessment Initiative Questionnaire. It's questions that ask providers for, do you do this control? And just here's the example. You can I'll make sure that you will be able to read this. And here's so the white bit is the standard question set, and the blue bit is the answers that in this particular case Box produced. Now, if you are a cloud consumer, I suggest that you take this CAIQ and throw it at your cloud provider. And this is a good start for any RFP, really. And what you can do is, and then they will say, well, why should we fill this in? Well, then you explain to them that they only have to fill it in once because everyone and his brother will be asking for this. And this is the dialogue that I keep hearing about. People are doing this. Banks are doing this. People that come to my training say, hey, this is a great idea. Let's do it. So you can have a look at that as well. But to really understand this, you have to understand the body of knowledge. So how far is that? Okay, there's 100 companies listed there. Don't think I have a screenshot, but that's a public list. The STAR attestation is already being done. The European Commission asks for that, and there's actually a tool to help online assessment management for this. So there's a ton of things going on here. Now here's a number one tip for cloud security, just to have something practical. If you're in the process of evaluating cloud providers, or if you want to enable your consumer, it's really, really simple. Have an exit plan before you begin. And the very least part, the least component of that exit plan is make sure that you have an independent copy of your data. And if you don't do this, you get burned, period. And if as a cloud provider, you're not supporting this, you won't be their cloud provider to begin with. So I know I've been talking significantly fast. Sum up some of the reasons to convince your boss to do this, or yourself for that matter. And I notice I have a lot of material today. Normally it goes a little bit slower. I don't know. Maybe you guys have been too interesting as an audience. So, as I said, there is no future without cloud, really. It's actually being used in most companies. So if you go to your boss, say, I need CCSK, and say, oh, we're not using cloud, say, well, you're not looking, because everybody's doing this. Suppliers are pushing this. I keep hearing this again and again on training, and yesterday I had the presentation in my alma mater, and they said, well, one of the reasons is, we have vendors that say, well, last time I sent you a CD, but next time the new version is going to be on the cloud. And they go like, oh, so you're forcing us to be a cloud consumer. Yep. as I made the metaphor earlier, security is like having brakes on a car. The better your brakes, the faster you can turn the corner. The world is connected. It's not your daddy's data center anymore. And even you can think, well, I don't use public cloud, I only use private cloud. Well, even private cloud requires security and it requires governance. Otherwise, one business unit will be fighting another, or they will be turning that thing into a local hell. All the stuff that you learn in CCSK is fairly applicable to private cloud as well. Having cloud is a compliance risk. It depends on the industry how bad it is, but you have to understand it to make sure that you're doing the right compliance statements. And finally, at this time, CCSK is the #1 vendor-neutral cloud security certification. And next year it may be different, but CCSK will definitely be a head start to that. I went through the CCSK learning material a couple of dozen times now. I have a fairly significant grasp of the CCSP learning material. And there's a couple of things that are not in CCSP that are in CCSK, but the bulk is, and CCSP is just much wider than that. So consider it as a stepping stone if you're in it for the long run. And I said the cloud provider certification is definitely built upon understanding CCSK. And this is true for providers as well as consumers. So with that, we're going to get into the question mode, and then I'll give some details on the learning options that you will have. Of course, there is material in the Udemy course even on self-study. And I think the Udemy course, I thought I made sure that the Udemy course actually has copies of all the documentation that you would need to pass the CCSK exam. But of course, not everybody is capable of, of course you would be capable of doing that, but it would be much more efficient to have somebody guide you through the process. Now let's scroll back through the chat to see if there are any questions, and then you can add some to that. In the meantime, okay, testing development, cloud service, assessing third-party cloud service for our client, great. BT is also on the way. Should we take the CCSK exam as cloud consumers? At least that's the way I understand this. I think so, because one of the best things that you can do as a cloud consumer is throw the cake at your cloud provider, and that kind of requires that you understand the cake. For one thing, CCSK also, as a matter of fact, the CCSK perspective, if you look at the body of knowledge, the perspective is mainly that of consumers, and of course, providers should be smart enough to translate that perspective into their perspective. But the primary focus of CCSK, the CCSK body of knowledge, is how does this look like from the cloud consumer perspective? Okay, some of the benefits for as a cloud consumer, I think I've covered that. A deep dive of Cloud Console, Ganesh. I don't fully understand what you're saying there, so maybe you want to elaborate a bit on that. Then the remark, ENISA has 8% share in the CCSK exam. Yeah, that is true. But as I said, that's the 8% that's fairly specific to the ENISA document, like economic denial of service and a couple more things. The rest, there's a significant overlap, as I said. In a way, I think in a way the ENISA document has more structure, and it's in a way also more applicable. And there's a successor document to that document that's even more approachable, but then that's a different story. Can we get slides and the recording? Yes, working on that. There's a cloud summit in New York on the 28th of October. Yeah, that's a CSA cloud summit. It's a one-day thing, I understand. Then Tim says, we should understand the value before risk. Very true. Unfortunately, the original CCSK perspective was cloud is scary. I have a different training, an additional training, the Cloud Adoption Essentials, and that goes into a lot more detail as to how do you actually articulate the value of cloud? Where is that value? And a lot of people go to the cloud for the wrong reasons. So it makes sense to have a look at that. I've actually adapted my own training material in CCSK to have a little bit more attention to the value perspective, how that would work. Okay, Cloud Console, get back to that. So, any more questions? I think I covered some of your questions at this time. Still, Ganesh, I don't fully understand what you mean with Cloud Console. Could you elaborate that a bit? Maybe you can speak up. No. Well, let's move into the learning options. And if you have any other questions, just keep typing. But of course, you will have to wait beyond the top of the hour to get them answered. I will also send out some announcements after this presentation, but it might be delayed until Sunday because right after this, I'm wrapping up a virtual CCSK session. Okay, so let's get beyond the question and answers. Training and learning options. If you're around, there's a classroom training in Utrecht, my hometown in the Netherlands. Very accessible, very convenient. We have it's half an hour from the airport, Amsterdam. It is we have hotels within walking distance, and it's always great fun. We do a social event as well. We always have people from across Europe, and I think 1 or 2 years ago, I had people from other continents fly in to this. Then, what's the audience for this? Well, architects, security managers, consultants. I have even had salespeople go through this, and they love it. Then there's a virtual training. I would have loved to do one earlier, but my agenda is significantly filling up. So right now, the plan is to have the virtual training starting December 14th. My reasoning was that in December nobody wants to leave home, so nice moment for virtual training. That will be 5 consecutive days. As I have another slide on that. Sorry. And then, of course, if you want to do this in company, either classroom or virtual, drop me a line. There is a tremendous value in going through this as a team. You can, for one thing, you can discuss things that are specific to your team. And the other thing is that it's not just that you know the stuff, but your team members also know the same things, and you know that they know. So the value proposition for team training is exponentially better almost than for individual training. But of course, we need to slice and dice it. Then the virtual training, how does it work? Well, there's an intake survey. There's 5 sessions of up to 2 hours. You're supposed to do 1 or 2 hours of self-study around that. Although, of course, you can delay that, but it'll come back to haunt you anyway. So there are optional exercises on Amazon and or OpenStack. I have a private support site for that virtual training that has recordings, videos, PDFs, quizzes, the whole shebang. And that's I think that's great value there. Then how does it look like? Okay, here's the modules structure. In a given time, I just flash it through you, and you can see it in the recording in more detail. Or you basically go to my website, which I will send you a link to anyway. Let's see. I'll come back to the final questions when we wrap up this. So, are you interested in that virtual training? To sign up for that right now, then you can just drop me a line, and I'll make you a special offer if you sign up, say, a coming week. Because December is still a while, still some time ahead, and I want to make it worth your while to commit to that already. So, with that, I go back to the questions. There's a couple more questions. DevOps days, there'll probably be CSA people or CSA members there. I don't know. It's San Francisco is travel-wise not one of my regular destinations, especially not for conferences. And we do have a lot of interesting DevOps going on near my hometown. Actually, last week I was at a Docker presentation. And there was a company called Worker, and they have offices in Amsterdam and in San Francisco. So we're pretty tuned into what's going on here. But again, you probably see some CSA people there, and I know that Rich Mogul is pretty deep on secure DevOps. So that will be fun, but actually it's a little bit outside of my scope. And yes, Friso, the exam is online, even if you go to classroom. We don't do the exam during the classroom. It will always be online. And with that, I've spent most of the hour. I hope you enjoyed it, that it wasn't too fast.